what's going on right now for the Florida football team is the identity phase, which we highlighted on last week's show. And after last week's episode, we got an intel piece on Gators Online. If you haven't checked it out yet, make sure that you go and read up on this team and some of the nuggets and buzz that's been coming from the building as the Gators have been going through offseason workouts. Now,
Zach, you're over there like Salt Bay, just sprinkling some nuggets.
Well, and I can't give it all away, right? This is
Yeah.
this is a 1,300 word story, but this have to mention obviously some of the nuggets that we kind of uncovered, just trying to ask some of the buzz on workouts and guys standing out and how the team is kind of taken to these workouts. Now, we had an opportunity to be joined a few weeks ago by Austin Barber to get his take on where the players were at, whether the workouts were easier, more challenging, and that's certainly kind of I think a theme that we've heard from coaches and certainly people within the program about just how far along and just in a much better place this team is in terms of having to go through these workouts, knowing what to do, knowing what the expectation is, having a routine that's kind of set in stone, and also, of course, being in the Hebener Center. And as we heard Austin say, the luxury of just in the efficiency of that. But look, what this time is for as much as anything else is leadership to emerge and guys to kind of stand out and your alpha dogs to kind of be identified in these offseason workouts. And it's not just, pushing weights in the weight room. These guys get out in the indoor practice facility and they have competitions. And there's a lot that Mark Hockey and his staff put these players through. And there is, just calling it like it is, a huge void of veterans and leaders and seniors and starters that left from this past year's team. We've highlighted the 31 roster departures. Well, 13 of those guys were starters. You've had seniors that were included in that group. You had kind of guys that were the heart and soul of your locker room. Guys like Ventrell Miller, obviously your quarterback is a leader. So many key pieces that are the voices and the ones that are pushing players through off-season workouts that are now no longer there. So you're having to have new guys kind of step into those roles, and you're also having transfers who haven't even been part of the program that are kind of walking in, and from day one, this staff is counting on them to serve in those leadership roles, and they don't even know their teammates yet. And so it's an interesting dynamic, Nick, but that's kind of what's taking place right now in phase two.
That's an interesting thing. We've talked about it with some of the guys before. Billy Napier does that. You've got to know the guy's first name, last name, where he's from, where he went to high school, and you get quizzed after practice. If you don't want to do wind sprints, you better get your answers right. Those tests are a little harder right now with all the new guys that have joined the team, but that's the interesting dynamic. And we talked about it a little bit on last show in regards to baseball and the transfer portal. That's the interesting dynamic now. You're getting guys who are older that should be in leadership roles or that were on their previous teams that now you need them to be that. And they're still wearing a "Hello, my name is" sticker on their chest. That's an interesting dynamic. It's not, just Florida. That's all of college football with the way the transfer portal is taking place. So Florida's going to need some of those new guys to step into leadership roles. You think of like a Micah Mazuka. Hey, you're probably one of the leaders in the offensive line room, and you've been here all of 5 weeks. But this is the time going through the kind of workouts that Florida is going through right now. Mark Hockey, and if we ever get the chance to talk to him, I got to ask him about like the no water during a workout rule, because I would pass out. But this is when you earn that respect, the way that you carry yourself in the weight room, the way you carry yourself when you're running, and when you're doing these things that are designed to mentally and physically stress you out and test you. This is when you show your true colors and where you earn the respect that you need to have if you're going to be a leader on a football team.
Yeah, and it's just obviously you look at the quarterback position, for example, you got two guys there kind of vying for that QB1 role, and both of them are transfers. Both of them are guys. Now, Jack Miller's been with the team, but you're talking about two Big Ten transfers. And, Graham Mertz obviously is in a weird situation because he has to, as a quarterback, be one of those vocal guys. And when he and Miller get split up in some of these competitions and he's having to lead his group of teammates, I mean, right out of the gate, he's kind of been tasked with that. So I think, though, for a guy that's a 3-year starter and has gone through that process, Nick, one thing in writing this piece and highlighting some of the first impressions that there are in the program of Graham Mertz, and we heard exactly from Billy some of this as well, just about like the preparation and knowing how to go about being a starter, preparing for a starter, carrying yourself like a starter, how you affect your teammates. I can count so many times last offseason, Nick, and I want to even say early into the fall, correct me if I'm wrong, where we had Billy on a number of occasions talk about how Anthony Richardson was still learning how to be a starter. And not just from a performance standpoint, but all those intangibles and responsibilities that I just talked about. Game prep, study, getting together with your teammates, making sure that you're kind of leading them and affecting them during the game week. And those are all things that Anthony had to learn throughout the offseason, throughout spring ball, into summer workouts. Those are not things that Graham Mertz is learning right now. Now, he's having to learn how to connect with his team, but in terms of what the job is and what you have to do to be a starting quarterback, that is something that he brings to the table. And I think that's already, from the sources that I talked to, that's been very evident that they've seen from him these first few weeks.
Well, go Badgers. That's he's gonna have to learn to push that out of his mind. But it will be interesting to me. I think a lot of fans and Billy probably is inadvertently driving this narrative in the fan base that, hey, this is Graham Mertz's job. I'm not ready to throw out Jack Miller. I think we haven't seen enough to say Jack Miller can't be that guy.
Sure.
I think
it's just he's never been that guy, and Graham
right.
has for 3 years. That's the difference I think we're seeing, or that's from what I've heard.
That's an early advantage, but
yeah.
Once March 4th, and listen, last year there was a ton of excitement because it was Billy Napier's first spring practice. There's way more question marks about this team, way more position battles. I would argue that this is a more important spring than the first spring. Billy Napier wrote a story about it yesterday, talked about the smoothness of going from year 1 to year 2. And now you're not teaching players what is foundation? What is identity? It's, hey, most of our guys have gone through this. They know what the expectations are. They know what the workload is going to be. And to me, it's the operation and the smoothness that you can operate in from one phase to the next. And then once practice starts, hey, we're not learning what the practice itinerary is. We know what it is, and we can get from one drill, one station to the next quickly, and you're getting more work in. And listen, the Florida Gators football team needs a lot of work. So I think that's something that we'll look at, but that's something where Jack Miller has an advantage over Graham Mertz. Having been in the program, this is his second spring, the second time he's going through these things. He knows these guys. He's thrown to these receivers already. So I think each quarterback will have, strengths and weaknesses and leverage in certain opportunities. But to say that Graham Mertz came this year and he's going to be the starter, I think is a little premature.
Sure, no doubt. And look, we haven't even hit the practice field yet. That's where obviously practice. So much is going to be decided. And again, those are two of the transfers from the past 2 years that have been added. Some of the recent ones are stepping into those leadership roles and have been asked to and have been expected to. You can read about that at Gators Online in this intel piece that we put out. Now, there's also returning players as well that have kind of taken that on. And we also included that in the intel piece and some of those guys that, it's interesting for the guys that joined the team last year as transfers or as freshmen in the 2022 class, and then certainly like this new crop of players, like they feel like it is time, from what I've been told, for them to take ownership of this team. And that, there were obviously a lot of leaders that left, And I think that those guys realize that, and whether they are new transfers that have been brought in or they're returning players, they just know that kind of the onus is on them now to step into bigger roles and to step into leadership roles. And I keep talking about it. And there's one kind of I guess stat here that really shows you how much these leadership roles have changed with this year's team compared to last year. If you guys remember the regimen phase that the Gators have, which is in the summer, around June, they split the roster up into teams. They get really competitive, and you have select teams. Now, for that regimen phase, there are 18 players that are designated by Billy Napier as captains. They've earned that role and they've earned that title through what they've shown in the first part of the offseason, in the foundation phase, identity phase, spring ball. 18 players. From those 18 players that were named last summer, there are only 4 that are still on the roster. Kingsley Eguakon, Xavier Henderson, Jason Marshall, and your boy, Jeremy Crawshaw.
Aussie.
And he is no doubt a leader on this team, but you're talking about just 4 of the 18 guys that Billy said last year, hey, these are the guys that are our leaders, are our captains, that have kind of led us through the offseason. 14 of those 18 are gone. So it really is on these guys to kind of step up. And, the Kamari Wilsons of the world, the Trevor Etiennes, I had a whole section on him, Nick, in this intel piece. Looked like Etienne season is upon us.
He's Etienne this offseason? And listen, if you have a punter as one of your captains, that probably counts for at least 3 players. So, seven of the 18 are back, essentially.
Let's be real.
It's for the brand. It will be interesting to see, and the people that you spoke with for your piece seemed really high on Trevor Etienne. I think Montreal Johnson is a guy that needs to be, have doing the things that have people talking about you in that way.
Yeah.
And it's not that he's not, it's based on, just who you're talking to. But I think as a guy going into your junior year, having played with this staff and in this program for now 3 years, that should be you.
Yeah.
You should be the guy that's leading that and being spoken of that way. And we're not saying he isn't. Zach didn't talk to every single person in the Florida
and I will add, I don't want to give away too many names, but I will add that I was told specifically from a source that there is a new wave of leaders on the offensive side of the ball. Trevor Etienne is one of those players, but I was also told specifically Montreal Johnson and Austin Barber are also guys that have stepped up. So it is both of them. But, for Montreal, this is a guy who is now entering his 3rd year, and he's been with Billy in 2 different programs. For Etienne look, this is a guy that's going through his first spring, and he's got these mid-year enrollees and these early enrollees and these freshmen coming to him and looking to him like he's a veteran leader. And he doesn't know any of these workouts either. And that was the most fascinating thing that I learned in writing this.
Sure.
And, I pulled up a quote from Billy in mid-November, and it really stuck with me because I feel like this is carried into the offseason, obviously. But he was talking about Etienne, and he said, the impressive thing about him is obviously he's smart and he's got the physical ability, but he's a leader, believe it or not. Now, this is him talking about him as a true freshman. He said that guy's a leader amongst the players. He will call a guy out. He's that kind of guy. And I think based on some of the things I've heard, that has carried over into these first 2 phases. And that's what you love to see, because look, Anthony Richardson is gone. And there's this weird dynamic with Jack Miller and Graham Mertz where neither one of them can really, be QB1 yet. So you need somebody in that backfield that's, I think able to kind of get the guys going. And I think that Etienne and Montreal Johnson stepping up is huge. Before we get off this, Nick, the Gators are not just replacing the quarterback of their offense, but the quarterback of their defense and the heart and soul of their defense. And just the guy that I think everybody looked to, not on just that side of the ball, but across the board as kind of their emotional leader. and that's Ventrell Miller, who's now moved on to the NFL. And, there is one of the new linebackers that have been added, and it's a pretty obvious guy if you read between the lines, that is kind of right away has stepped in and tried to take on that, veteran void that's now there at that middle linebacker position. Although, based on the news that we saw this week, Nick, you cannot count out, I think, Derek Wingo potentially being that guy or one of those guys as well. And look, let's be honest. It wasn't just Ventrell Miller. It was Amari Burney, too. It was both of them. It was that tandem, that senior tandem, that the defense got so much leadership, so much experience, so much from. I think Wingo, our first Warful Man of the Month for 2023. And look, this is a guy that got that honor, and he's hurt right now, or coming off of injury. So to me, he's definitely a guy that could fill those shoes, and I think they're going to lean on to potentially be one of the quarterbacks of the defense.
Yeah, and this is something that we put on the message board, so it eventually comes out for free. But Derek had that shoulder surgery. In the picture there, you can see that the little brace sticking out. Had shoulder surgery. Also played on a broken foot. When Ventrell got hurt, or when Ventrell got
suspended,
suspended. Derek Wingo broke his foot that Monday in practice and just said, listen, we got to get a shot and we got to play a half of football. And then went on and obviously played in the Las Vegas Bowl. He'll have foot surgery. I don't know why I'm not a doctor. I don't know why you can't do both at the same time. Hey, if I'm going to be on the shelf, let's get both of these things done. So I'll be interested to see if that limits him, with spring ball just less than 3 weeks away, or if he'll be able to play through it. But he's a guy who is a leader, and I think it's taken some
really
time.
He's really impressive in that video, yes. Nick.
Yeah, very well. He went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School, Zach. So we're all pretty impressive.
That's what it is.
We're all pretty impressive.
STA pride.
In our own ways, we're impressive. But he's a guy who, and I've gotten some pushback because I released my projected depth charts for spring, and I list him as the starter. And there's a lot of pushback. What do you mean he's the starter? You've got Mitchell and Spurlock and Scooby. You've got all these other guys. I'm like, he's this guy, Derek Wingo, has put himself in a position to be that. He's a leader vocally. He's a leader the way he attacks his workouts. So I think Derek Wingo is a guy who someone will have to take that job from him because he is the right to at least start the spring and probably fall workouts as the starting middle linebacker. You're replacing over 100 games of experience with Burney and Ventrell Miller. So that's a lot. And our guy JD Piquel and myself have said, Ventrell Miller was the Gators defense Wi-Fi. And when you took the Wi-Fi out, communication wasn't the same, and the defense didn't play as well, in that USF game. So it's definitely massive shoes to fill.
It is. And as you mentioned, it's not just Ventrell, it's Burney as well, and all those starts and all those tackles and all that experience. And I think if they can get, obviously, Wingo healthy and then him to be one of those guys for that linebacker position, I think that they could be in a good spot with some of the transfers that they've brought in. And there's going to be a lot of competition there for both of those roles between the returning players and the transfers. But I just think for Wingo, it's taken him some time to obviously kind of settle in. He was a guy that didn't play a lot of linebacker in high school. He was more of a defensive end. So I think it took him some time to maybe learn the nuances of the position, and certainly being able to play behind Ventrell Miller and learn from that guy will do him wonders. But when we saw him playing in the Las Vegas Bowl hurt and getting that, that was his full start. I think it was career high 8 tackles that he made in that game, had a sack for a loss of 12 yards. So one of the few bright spots in the bowl game, Nick.
With a broken foot and a torn labrum. You're playing, with one half of your body, essentially, and you, in a brief glimpse, showed what you're capable of and your potential.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously was encouraging sign for the future. And again, we'll monitor his health throughout the spring. if he's not a guy that can go out there and be leading. I would definitely expect him to be one of those 18 leaders for those regimen teams when they get to the summer. But for the
100%.
time being, they also need some of these other transfers and guys that they brought in at the linebacker spot to kind of step up. And again, there's an obvious candidate right there for that role. And there's been some other teams as well. And, final thing is we kind of talk about football, and then we'll jump to this interview with Jeff, though. I did want to ask, in doing this intel piece, what was some of the buzz in the building and the feeling about where this team is at, where the roster's at, now that they've seen these guys go through workouts, they've gotten some verified results on speed, height, and length, and all that stuff. I was told that there is certainly some confidence coming from that building and from that coaching staff in terms of what they've done with the roster and the players that they've added, the eval process that they have, that they trust, and kind of the results that they've already shown and the early returns on some of these guys. They have a very positive outlook on their personnel, and think that the Gators could have a good team this year. Now, time will tell, but they obviously trust their process, Nick.
Listen, I hope they're right. For their sake, I hope they're right, because there's not a lot of positivity, coming from the outside of that building. It's this is a 6-6 team again. This is a 5-7 team. What do you mean, Graham Mertz? Graham hurts my feelings.
And that's what I took the feedback that I got back and asking within the program what the feel was. Part of that response and the very positive, literally was quoted as very positive outlook. I think that they think they're better than that. They think that they have a chance to be better than what those expectations are.
Yeah.
Now, how much better? How many wins better? Again, that's still to be determined. But look, they lost so much from last year's team. You're talking about 85 scholarship players. You lost 35. You lost 13 of 22 starters. But if you're looking for a silver lining, those guys went 6-7, and many of those guys were on a team prior to that went 6-7. So if you feel like, as a coaching staff, that you've added some talent that you recruited, that you evaluated, that you deemed a fit for your scheme, you got to feel like you're going to upgrade in some spots, and that's how they feel. But you got to prove it on the grass, Nicholas.
Got to prove it between those white lines, and it'll be interesting to see. This spring, for me, I'm more excited just to see some of these position battles, and I wrote about 5 that I'm really looking towards. There's even more than that. We'll see. March 4th, when the team gets out there, that's a big weekend. Miami will be here in town, our guests' least favorite team, and spring football gets kicked off. So big weekend, that first weekend in March. We're going to find out a lot about the Gators, and you and I will have, I'm sure, some strong opinions on, hey, don't think those people that we talked to inside the building were right. This team stinks. Or, hey, maybe my opinion on the team was premature, and maybe my opinion on the team will change based on seeing how they play and what they look like this March.